presentations today, so that's more than we usually do. But the speakers kindly agreed to cut their presentations a little bit shorter. I think, hey, how you doing? And I think we'll also add a couple of minutes at the end of the meeting, so we can hear from everyone and also have a good discussion. So before we get started with introductions of our speakers, I wanted to see if first of all, I wanted to see if folks online can hear us. We had some technical difficulties last week. Please give us a sign. Let us know if you can hear us. You have to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Works perfectly fine on my end.
Great. Thank you. That's good to know. All right. So we have with us here, we have actually remotely, we have Dr. Sven Kerner, the founder of Things Thinking. He'll be joining us remotely, and he will be our first speaker. Then after that, we have Patrick Schmidt and Jenny Xia of Free Will. They're here with us today. And then we have Geddes Mitkes.
Geddes wanted to go last.
Oh, he wants to go last. Yeah. Okay. So then we have Philip Flock, the managing partner of Field Fisher Germany. And then Geddes Mitkes will be our last speaker today. All right. So I wanted to see if anyone, before we get started, are there any updates we wanted to share with the group? You all know that Future Law is on April 5th this year. I hope we can all make it. Anyone in the group has anything new to report? Any reports from Legal Week last week? No? All right. All right. So then why don't we start and turn it over to Sven?
All right. Hi, guys. You should be able to see my screen. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for having us. Thanks, Roland, for taking us, because I guess we've been referenced from Bernhard Walter last year. We had some connections here. And I'm going to click on Start My Video, so you're going to be able to see me as well. Hi, guys.
Yeah.
Okay. We are a spin-off of the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. We've been doing research in artificial intelligence for the past 13 plus years. And we focused on natural language processing / semantics, and well, AKA the meaning of natural language. And we just lately migrated into the legal space because some of our customers said, hey, what you do with us in the requirements engineering space, in the automotive space, and the auditing and insurance space, this could actually be handy in the legal space as well. So we're still trying to get some traction here, and this is where we're very happy to being able to present to you guys. What we essentially do is we follow a very old Chinese proverb, and I guess all of us will do that too today in the presentation, is that, you know, I'll be talking for the next 10 minutes and I'll be telling you guys things, a lot of things potentially. What you will do though is you'll try to extract some significant meaning for you guys and, you know, kind of form a model of whatever the representation of that is that I'm going to tell you. What you won't do as a human being is trying to remember the words I'm uttering. And that's essentially statistical data-driven model modes we do, you know, like the standard neural networks. And again, this is where natural language is not very statistical. There's a lot of examples out there. So our focus was on combining various AI technologies to being able to extract the meaning and therefore being able to reason on the meaning of natural language. I'll give you some examples. This, you've probably seen a lot of times, is more or less a problem solved. If you, for instance, say, can you find the adult female in a picture, right? That's a data-driven issue. What's not really into data that often because the information is just not there, but it's very simple for a human being. If I, for instance, say, who's the mother and who's the teacher, right? Not hard for a human to do, but very hard for a machine because that includes additional information that you don't yet have in the training data. Therefore, you have to have some, well, semantics. So what we do, there's three process. Again, I'm not going to go into the technical details. The first thing we do is we do what we call the semantic fingerprinting. We're trying to decipher the meaning of what we're being told in pretty much any language, and therefore being able to find other aspects or corresponding aspects of certain meanings. I'll show you that in an example. The second part we're going to do is once we have and found the corresponding passages in documents, contracts, whatever, just imagine an NDA, we extract information. So the second part is extracting information. We could say, well, for instance, this NDA runs for 48 months and maybe, you know, the penalty if you do this and this and this is maybe $2 million. That might be interesting information that you want to have, that you want to extract. Again, that's something humans would do as well. And the third step then is, and again, you don't have to follow all these 3 steps, depends on what you want to use. You can combine it, but you don't have to, is then being able to reason on that and say, okay, if it's 48 months, it might not be acceptable for our company because 36-month NDA contract, stuff like that, or $2 million is more than our insurance. So we kind of accept that. We got to negotiate that to $1 million. And again, this is something humans do today, but that's stuff the machine can do. We've proven that. We have what we call our implementation path. So we've done this a couple of times of how we proceed forward. The whole idea of that here is to actually fail fast, right? I mean, you've heard that a lot, obviously, in the Valley, but the technological introduction takes roughly an hour where we show the people what the system can do. You get a hands-on experience, and we show everything live. The discovery workshop we then do, if you're still interested as a customer, it takes about a day, and we define use cases and processes that you want the system to run for you. And then we'll take a 10 to 20-day proof of concept workshop where we essentially try or give you a working system after that proof of concept that you can play with and evaluate. If you like it, obviously it's not going to be perfect because we're all far from perfect, but if it helps you, whatever you want to do, then go to the pilot project, pay your subscription fee and work with us, or just cancel it from there. And again, it's about failing fast and trying to figure out who's working with you and who's not. To give you an idea what we're doing and finding relevant contract data is, for instance, if you receive information, like right now in Europe, it's pretty hot, is data regulation policies, right, with the data protection. We slice and dice any kind of document that's GDPR related, so the machine can work with that, and then we can combine that to any kind of historic data and information that you have in your system. Again, this is no supervised training, deep learning, where you have to train on all your data. You just give us your old documents, and the system can say, okay, this was compliant, we're all good with this part. Oh, by the way, there's one thing in there, that's a problem. Right, so essentially you can give us a 220-page contract and we can pinpoint you to 24 parts of that contract where we say, hey, you really want to focus on that? Because that's supposedly bad, at least from our standpoint. So it's like a sidekick helping you to read faster, so to speak. Obviously, there are areas like the yellow ones where the system is kind of sure what it's supposed to do, but not really. So the system will mark certain aspects and tell you to, well, I need a human to help me here, but I kind of have an idea what it is. And there's other stuff the system can't do yet. It's very important that the system does not know what it can't do, does know what it can't do. So for instance, the white parts here, the system is not sure what it should do with it. And rather than making it wrong, it'll just leave it blank and say, hey, you will have to check that because I don't get that part. I've never seen this before. The second part, as I mentioned before, is then extracting information. So for instance, here we have the European regulations for data protection. It states that if you're running a SaaS service, you have to describe how you encrypt. So this will be one of the parts of one of Microsoft's documents where they say how they encrypt. What the law obviously does not state is specific technical information about encryption because the law should still stand in 10 years from now and encryption might be slightly different. So what we do on top of that, and you might be able to see that with the green little boxes here within the yellow, and again the color coding, I mean you can choose any color coding you want, is we extract information here from this from that document. We say, listen, it's essentially SSL TLS encryption, and on the REST encryption at the REST point, it's AES-256. Also, we're extracting information like the hosting application. In this case, it'd be in the Netherlands and in Ireland, which is fine from EU regulation policies. For instance, if we would extract something like London, that would still be okay as of today. But I guess in the reasoning part, which now comes in the third step, we would want to mark this document as potentially dangerous because there's a lot of legal work coming towards us concerning Brexit. And we don't know when that's going to happen, but it will most likely happen the next months. And then the third part, and again, do not focus on the user interface because that's our customer's user interface, right? We're just a web service that's talking to all different kinds of systems, whether that's integrated into Microsoft Word or any kind of SAP system, anywhere in between. We couldn't care less. What the system does here is that you have a list of, that's actually the law, and that's a list of documents. So, addendums and whatever kinds of information for your, in this specific case, it's GDPR again, but it doesn't matter. And the system says, okay, that part of the law is covered by this, this, and this. And by the way, we have a contradiction here, so this is dangerous. You want to focus on that, there's something wrong. The next part we found out, and again, we didn't know that, our customers told us that, is if you as a lawyer are able to kind of consolidate certain parts of the contract and say, hey, these parts here always belong together. So if you're addressing point 1764, we would expect you to address also 63, 62, and 61. What we can say right now with the semantic fingerprint is the system could not find any relevant data in all of the provided documents, whether that's one document or 25 documents, where these questions seem to be covered. So essentially that information in this specific case was just missing in the contracts. Again, the system can't help you any further, but it can't just tell you, hey, there's something wrong. This contract might not be legally binding in the European Union. There's some issues with it. The business model, because I know that question is going to come from Roland, I'm going to take that before you ask, is...
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we do paid proof of concepts. So if you're not paying, you're not really interested, right? We're techies, and in the AI space, everything is super hype, and everybody wants to play with you in your sandbox. We're trying to find the right customers and saying, hey, listen, if you play with us, and if you're interested, you'll have to pay. And if you're really interested, it doesn't matter whether you have to pay or not. And obviously, as I mentioned before, once you play with us and it works out, you just pay a subscription. We focus on subscriptions on a per company, per use case basis, because we would like to encourage maximum usage from our customers, because obviously we're still learning, especially in the legal field in this specific case, because we don't have the domain knowledge yet, right? There's a lot of things we don't know. There's a lot of things the machine might be able to help, and maybe some things it just won't be able to help at all, and we're still finding that out. So the more you use it, the more you'll learn. The first instinct or reflex that people always have when working with AI that we learned is to automate, your expensive tasks, which is absolutely running your proof of concepts. We still filter or pick the people that play with us in our sandbox a little further, where we say, okay, we want to work with these kind of customers that have a different opinion on that. Obviously, again, that's something you want to do in the proof of concept. But let's assume this is your job here, and it takes you a year to do it right now, to work on that field. If AI helps you to do this in one day, we don't want you to be one of the companies that says, oh, cool, that's just going to save me some money. That's a good first step, but that's not the kind of customer that's really working with you in the AI field. What you do want to have is a customer that says, oh, if I could do this in one day, then I could actually do this and this and this and this and this too. Is that correct? And we say, potentially, but let's walk this road together. And it's about increasing your revenue rather than just cutting your costs. Because if you're the latter one, this is not going to be the perfect relationship. This is what we learned. Customers who think that way are a lot more open-minded when it comes to legal tech and artificial intelligence. The market, the people we're working with right now are legal publishers who are very interested in terms of their special semantic search and stuff like that, finding the right parts in the legal publishers. Obviously, the large law firms, including 3 of the big 4. And the most receptive ones, and we kind of love them for that, are the in-house corporate legal departments. And I think that was also mentioned in the last talk 2 weeks ago. They have no partner structures. There's no earn-out kind of hindering, like, oh, no, I don't want any innovation, right? They have a lot of workload and pressure, so they're, for us, they're a hotbed for innovation. And essentially, they all tell us, hey, just whatever makes the pain go away. And we can alleviate some of that. What's next and what we're working on right now is multi-language semantics comparison, because the sweet part of semantics is once you're at a semantic level, it doesn't matter whether you call something a car, un auto, un voiture, or un auto in Spanish. It means the same thing, right? So we were able in other use cases in the requirements engineering space to compare English requirements documents with, in this case, Portuguese and French specifications and say, hey, something is not working out here, right? This seems to be misaligned. What we just did today, because that's brand new news, is because Roland, you've seen that, is that Germany now finally has an official government. Well, actually, they don't have an official government yet, but they agreed on forming a government. And there was 2 bigger parties. Bottom one is Angela Merkel's one, and they were trying to figure out a contract for the coalition. And they each had respectively 33 and 20%, after the elections. Now, what we found out, we threw that into the system and compared it with the coalition contract. So whose party strategies went where into the coalition contract. And these are preliminary results, but these guys in the press were told they did a good job. And what we can see from the straight numbers from the machine, how it compared the information, it looks the same to us, right? They have more than 50% of the share in that contract. And again, the machine compares that based on the meaning, not on the actual wording, right? So if I said Roland is running away from Sven, or I say Sven is trying to catch Roland, that's pretty similar in the very same context. And that's kind of what we're working on right now. Again, these are not final results. We're going to write a block entry on that, but it's going to take us another 48 hours to get the numbers straight. Why we're here today, why we're presenting, kind of have some issues and asks, obviously. One of the things I was going to discuss with you is what we call the digital readiness of law firms. That, from our experience, varies greatly, right? I mean, some law firms still have the conviction that they are completely digitalized because they just introduced email. And obviously, coming from the AI space, these are customers that we cannot help at all, right? It's just, and the information has to be there. I mean, digitally, we have to have, like document management systems, all these kind of things. If that's not existing, there's no way we can help. And the most important part we're working on is benchmarking our own system, right? Like right now with the coalition contract, there's stuff in there which I, as a layman, I can look at the comparison that the system makes and say, yeah, that is probably the same thing, though it's completely different wording. But there's a lot of stuff in the legal space where the system says this is different or this is the same thing, and it's hard for me to judge whether the system is right or wrong. So we have to have, people that suffer with or under us that help us to, improve the machine. Say, hey, no, this is completely off what the machine is doing here. This doesn't make any sense. And the machine has a lot of, let's call it common sense, which is world knowledge. But world knowledge and common sense is not always completely aligned with legal knowledge. So therefore, again, we would need some input and correction here. And obviously, we're looking for having a healthy discussion with you guys, what we call cross-pollination with you. We have a cooperation with Technical University of Munich. Obviously, this is how we get to know Bernhard and the others. And yeah, trying to get some feedback and ideas. And that's pretty much it. And I think I also did it within 10 minutes, sort of 12.
Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Questions for Glenn?
This is my contact information. If you have any information, just let me know.
Yeah, folks, if you have questions online, you have to unmute yourself or use the chat function. So when did you started 4 years ago, you said, or?
With the research, you say?
Yeah.
Well, no, research 13 years ago. We founded the company and spun it off last year.
Yeah,
so we're going to have our first year anniversary on the 23rd, but it's 13 years of research.
Great. And what are you? So are you saying you're only working with law firms that are already somewhat tech enabled?
I guess it doesn't have to be that way, but our experience is that these are the only ones that can actually help, right? I mean, the less digitally organized the process is, the less we can actually do, because we have that in other areas as well, where the customers say, oh, you could do this for us. I'm like, yeah, can you give me the data to compare? And they're like, oh, no, we can't get that out of the database. I'm like, then I can't help you then. I'm sorry. If you don't have the data available, how should I teach the machine? Right?
And are people using it in mostly for kind of in litigation context, or also contract analysis?
That's what we're starting with now. So it's more or less like contracts analysis. Yeah. So one of the things we have is you get a contract in, the system marks the stuff in green and yellow and red, right? Just and the red stuff is just what you deem to be non-compliant within your company structure, right? It doesn't have to be a bad clause. It's just like we usually don't accept that part of the clause. This is how they use it. And what they do is they ask the machine on top of that, and again, a customer came with that idea, says, would we be able to find a clause that's semantically similar to the one that we think is non-compliant, but from our perspective is compliant? So it might not be 95% semantically similar, but maybe 76%, right? Because it's got to be different in meaning. Otherwise, it would be non-compliant as well. And we were actually able to do that with the machine. So essentially what the system does in their specific case, it's able to give you direct feedback suggestions saying like, listen, there's an NDA, paragraph 16, we cannot accept this. This is our counter offer for paragraph 16. And you can more or less instantly answer within a couple of seconds if you want to do this. And what we found out is that once the lawyers see that and the system makes a suggestion, they say, yeah, that's reasonable, let's just send that, right? These are kind of the workflows. But again, we're still learning in the legal space. There's a lot of more stuff we've done in other areas so far. Tax.
Can you say a word about your company? Like how many people are there? Are you sort of self-funded? Are you?
We had one series of funding. So a seed funding, we did that last year in May. And we're 8 people now. Some which are PhDs or directly from, we more or less drew half of the group from university, and we're still working with university relations. So we're still giving our lectures for AI at university. We're still cooperating with the professors and everything. That's a pretty good and healthy relationship. And again, that's how we got to learn about it. And so we kind of try to keep our fingers tapped at the academia thing because, you know, I mean, that's first of which it's a very good recruitment possibility. And, you know, back in the day when we started the AI lecture, there was like 10 people in there. And, you know, ever since the last 3 years, the AI lectures are just packed. It's still, it's still maths, but now it's just cool. And that kind of helps the recruiting process. Yeah.
Sure. All right. Any other questions?
The products you mentioned, it looks like they're very bespoke. You see a customer and you design and do a proof of concept. But the problems that I'm assuming the problems they're trying to solve are all pretty similar. Is there plans to generalize it and make it more of an off-the-shelf product, or is that just where you are at the moment?
No, that's exactly it. That's the stuff for the legal space, right? We more or less have that for other parts to kind of like productize it. It's always going to be the same platform. Platform is something you can't sell, right? It doesn't really work anymore. What you want to have, I fully agree, is this is the off-the-shelf solution. It does stand that out of the box, and it would integrate straight into whatever kind of process you have. And that's kind of the issue we still have. No real process leading software within the legal law firms. You know, everybody's got like their own solutions. Whereas, for instance, if you went to big automotive companies, they all use the same requirements tools, IBM doors. Right, and you're like, okay, that's our starting point. And you know, web service just integrates there, and we're fine. For the legal companies, it's just scattered all over the place. You know, self-developed stuff, or they just say, hey, we just do everything in Word, and that's kind of the challenge we have. And again, we're still learning. The system itself on the platform, you know, you can set that up in your system within a couple minutes, and it does most of the things you've seen today. It does that out of the box. But again, it's not that easy, you know, for a standard lawyer. It's not an out-of-the-box solution yet. Again, any ideas?
All right. So thank you so much, Sven. We're a bit pressed for time. So thank you for sharing your email address. So if people have follow-up questions, please reach out to Sven directly. It was great to have you. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
And look forward to continuing the conversation at another time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sven. And, turn it over to Jenny and Patrick now. So.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Nope. Great. We are Free Will. We started here at Stanford out of the classes here with a bunch of colleagues across the different grad schools. And what we're looking at is in the next 20 years, the great wealth transfer, which is baby boomers are passing away and passing $30 to $35 trillion. And we think this is potentially the greatest opportunity for philanthropy ever. So just to get kicked off, a little bit about our team. Patrick and I are here today. We have very different backgrounds. We're both very enthusiastic about this opportunity. Patrick was a former head of innovation at change.org, helped grow them to 100 million users. He also led email fundraising for Obama, so acutely familiar with the fundraising space and understanding how we can use tech to really scale impact. I'm a little bit different background, helped co-found a company called Paribus, fintech background out of Brooklyn, New York, and graduated in math and behavioral economics at Harvard, and then came here to do my MBA after doing some impact investing and private equity at Big Capital. And one of our other wonderful teammates, we also met here at school, and she helps lead partnerships. So what is planned giving? Most of you guys very well know this, but I'll go through it just in case. So any major gift made at lifetime or death as part of total estate planning. So usually this is through retirement accounts, 401ks, wills, trusts, things like that. And why do we care about it? So planned giving today is about $30 billion per year, but we think it has vast opportunity to grow. One, because of demographics alone. So we're currently in the baby bust. As we go to the baby boom, the amount donated per year should double. And we also think that planned giving today is not done well. We think that this number could increase vastly with better tools. And nonprofits are excited about this too for pretty obvious reasons. Those are some pretty big numbers. So the average bequest from middle-class American individuals, anywhere between $30,000 to $70,000. Our target customer, as you can imagine, might be someone who is passing away without much in the way of liquid assets, but maybe a house a lot of illiquid assets and the ability to really make a giving decision based on that. So what we've seen in ours and our advisors' research is approximately 3 times of a donor's overall lifetime giving in one shot at the very end. So what's the problem here? On the consumer side, you'd expect that people would be excited about this, or maybe that they wouldn't be excited about end-of-life planning at all. Most people perceive it as scary, complicated, and expensive. And that's something we've heard echoed throughout 300 interviews that we've done here at Stanford with partnership with the D School, as well as talking to dozens of trust and estates professionals and professors. Americans just aren't doing the planning that they need to do. The second piece of it is, as you can see, so 55% of baby boomers don't have wills. That's 80 million Americans that are in an age where they probably should have one. 40% of parents only have wills, and you can imagine that might be an interesting choice to let the government decide guardianship at the end of the day. And African Americans and Latinos are twice as likely to lack estate planning. So what we really feel like there is here is a huge accessibility problem. A lot of people know that they have to do it, and in their interviews they say, totally gonna do it next year, like every single time. And people have been saying this for decades. On the nonprofit side, you have a completely different set of problems. So nonprofits are the 3rd largest U.S. industry. We think that they are chronically underinvested in terms of technology. $2 trillion in annual revenue and constant fundraising needs, of course. And many nonprofits spend between $3,000 to $5,000 to generate a single bequest. And that's because most of their planned giving efforts are through hand-to-hand combat. So this is like going to high net worth individuals and trying to convince them to go see an estate lawyer to put gifts into their plan. So what are we doing about it? So we are a for-profit startup, but a social venture with 2 big missions. One is to move $1 trillion into nonprofits. Another one is to increase accessibility to end-of-life planning. And our actual product has a couple pieces. So the first one is when you go to the website, it's free and intuitive online tools to help start your estate planning. So you could go head to tail, and if you have a simple estate, don't have a blended family, you're under the estate tax threshold, all those things, you can just finish it, print it, sign it, you've got your full legal will for free. You can come back anytime and modify, and that also doesn't cost money as opposed to going to see a lawyer maybe multiple times. If you have a more complex estate, what happens is we actually make it easier to find trust estate attorneys, because a big pain point that we kept hearing is that people, even who want to, just don't know where to start. They don't go shopping for trust and estate attorneys very frequently. And then the tools prompt charitable giving. So we've seen 6 times the charitable giving on our platform than the national average. And nonprofit organizations pay us an annual subscription fee for custom versions of these tools to help them convert their annual givers to planned giving donors.
Sure. So let me walk you through a little bit of what this looks like. So this is just the homepage, and I'll go through this fairly quickly. We try to make it fairly straightforward and clean and simple, so that not just to make it easy and intuitive, but make it a little bit comforting. One of the insights we've uncovered in all of our interviews is that people actually feel much more likely to do estate planning when they're thinking about doing it for other people and for the people and causes they care about instead of for themselves, right? So think about sort of going to work every day to provide for a family. People do that. People put off their own root canal for years or decades because it's something purely for themselves. One of the components here, and one of a very small piece, but an important one, is we ask people whether they want to give to any nonprofit organization. They're free to give to none at all, or any one of that they choose. We feature a few that are sort of very common and well known. For something like the Texas Children's Hospital, which is a partner in Texas, it's raised about $1 million in new bequests so far. We give them custom tools that allow sort of an easier path to giving to TCH. Again, they can give to TCH or another nonprofit or none at all, so that's totally flexible. For a nonprofit side, this has been a bit of a breakthrough. Bequests are typically, they're one of the highest ROI types of giving, but they're hard work. And so typically ROI is about 10 to 1. For many of our clients, we've actually seen more than 100 to 1, and they can be up and running in more than a few hours, or less than a few hours, which is exciting. So progress to date, we have 36 nonprofits that we're working actively with. 85% of initial conversations convert to demos, which is a good sign. 6,100 people have made wills or printed out documents that they'll bring to attorneys, and I'll get back into that in a moment. And I was really hoping that we'd be able to update the slide and tell you that $70 million has been pledged to charity. And I was sitting here while Jenny was talking, hitting refresh just in case. but no deal. So 69.9 million has been pledged to charity so far.
It's still impressive. Still impressive.
When did you start?
We sort of got started building in January. I would say that of that, 90% has been in the last 6 months. So that's accelerating. 7 million of that has been in the last 7 days. So that's a good sign. Here are some of the clients we're working with. A little bit on competitors. So the world that we're operating in is, there's obviously attorneys, there's a bunch of online will providers, Rocket Lawyer, Willing, LegalZoom. This is sort of a well-trodden domain for the most part. They all cost money. And when we ran tests, we would see that engagement would drop 90% even when we tried charging $30. People don't like paying for things. And when people weren't paying $30, they would also not make a $50,000 request. So there's huge value being lost by not having some subsidy for that. And then there's sort of similar in the nonprofit world, is largely consulting, and then some direct mail firms that are gradually transitioning online. It's not that exciting. Our big ask is that we're looking for a head of legal research. And so know anyone, reach out to Jenny. We're also moving to New York and launching this out of New York starting in July. So we're looking for other folks in the community there. And yeah, anything you want to add?
And most of all, we're looking for feedback. So question, what gets you excited? What gets you worried? All of that. We want to make sure we're vetted.
Cool. Very cool. So yeah, I was just going to ask you, and you shared the competitive landscape slide, because there are existing players out there, and some are on the LegalZoom side, Rocket Lawyer, and others, they're more on the trust and estates attorney side, and they help them with like intake forms and some automation, process automation. I'm not quite sure exactly where you place between those two.
Sure. So we actually do both. And this may not have been clear enough in the demo, but the path out of free will is that you can either sort of finalize your own will there and choose to print it out. Obviously, you have witnesses, executors, etc. Or you can document all your wishes and bring it to a trust and estates attorney. And our ideal world is that everyone goes to find a high-priced T&E lawyer. And obviously, that's not necessarily the world that we live in all the time. But so we provide both. We're not necessarily serviced for trust and estates lawyers to, sort of hand to a client as they walk in the door. But actually, we're seeing a lot of people use the tools and then go find T&E lawyers, and that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
The other thing I would add is just operationally speaking, like we've only been alive for like a year, right? And so we wanted to make sure we were testing this super leanly. So for us, the actual document creation and making sure we could watch people like, are they actually going to do this? Like that was the first hypothesis that we were going to test. So we built out that test suite with, a bunch of like wonderful legal students here at Stanford and Berkeley to like get that together. And I think the next phase is thinking about, well, nonprofits do have all of these people who are in the like $5+ million range who still go to Google in order to find lawyers, right? And who are going through that way. So how can we make sure for those people who we know we will never be able to service online because their needs are too complicated, that we'll be able to build out that suite. But operationally speaking, that's a big lift, right? And we've talked to a ton of ACTech lawyers, a ton of professors. How is it that you can efficiently build a like lead gen that will send people to the right lawyer? And it's so hard. Like we've seen this whole landscape littered with startups that have tried to do this and failed. Because it's a big operational lift.
Yeah, I agree that we could do a whole conference on that topic alone. Yeah. But I think what's interesting, when you sell, many legal products, credence products, right, and wills in particular, and so you need to create that trust in your brand. And I say, I think LegalZoom, they had, for some of the services, they had at some point they had a what was
security
called
guarantee.
Security guarantee or something like that. That if they mess up, then they pay you something, right? That's a problem that you guys are encountering too. How do you address that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that was a hypothesis coming in, and we're trying to test everything very leanly. Turns out money speaks more than trust, unfortunately. So LegalZoom has had that up, and we did some interviews with people who are at LegalZoom, and honestly, like they haven't paid out much money at all from that program. It's mostly marketing, but it's their way of capturing trust. And our way of doing that, I think, is a couple ways. One, trusted distribution through nonprofits that people actually care about, so that helps us. Two, social proofing on the website. So just expressing how many wills have been made, like that is a real number on our website. Like we don't, play around with that number. And so people seeing that other people are acting. And then the third thing is more than a barrier on trust and security has been this barrier to just like, I don't want to try it unless it's free to try. And so that's what we've seen so far.
Cool. Other question?
This is great and exciting. I'm curious about the role of the do-it-yourself sort of market area. And in terms, I went quickly to Intuit, Willmaker, and then the NOLA Press sort of series that has a emergence do-it-yourself out of Berkeley in some ways. And am curious about the relationship with taxation. I know that the Intuit ecosystem has TurboTax, and it's in at least United States and Canada, and QuickBooks also in Intuit is in 150, 160 countries. To what degree are you sort of thinking and growing to sort of engage both other countries, but also that sort of ecosystem with taxation processes, for example?
I'm happy to start. I think taxes are very complicated and not a market that we want to go into yet. I think the next adjacency that's actually really exciting is advanced healthcare directives. Like, fact of the matter is people need them. Doctors want people to have them. People want people to have them, but no one wants to create them. And so our intuition is, hey, if we could offer those for free too and increase access there, that would really be great for our mission. And is in line with creating legal documents that have a lot of the same fields and things like that. So that's where we're thinking about as adjacency. International expansion is also something we've thought about, like our nonprofits are asking for it. I get emails all the time from Canada and Australia being like, hey, when are you going to offer it here? And I keep writing like, oh, well, we have time to develop the product. So that's definitely something we're looking into. Yeah. Turns out like figuring out the legal research for all 50 states is like way harder than adding on one incremental country. Yeah.
Does legal include taxation in those, state by state? When you say legal, do you also include peripherally taxation questions state by state?
It's a great question. We haven't really discussed taxation. I think for us, the big adjacencies are around end-of-life preparedness, because we've seen people with a willingness to engage on this and what's traditionally been very difficult. And so in our interviews, that either the sort of LegalZoom avenue or even when they go to a trust and estate attorney, it's a very sort of clinical experience. It is just like, okay, so you're going to die soon. What are you going to do? And it's not very warm or friendly. And so things like advanced healthcare directives or life insurance or other things that are in that adjacency is probably a more likely outcome. It's a great question.
One quick thought, one adjacency might be digital estates, right? Obviously you thought of that. And are you aware of MediaX's research program in this area?
Very cool.
Yeah, if we have time, I can show it to you later.
We'll look into it, but
yeah.
Follow up. Thank you.
Thanks for presenting, super interesting. Great traction as well in just 1 year, so congratulations. You said you are looking at moving into New York and you need people in New York. Can you give some more color about like what kind of people?
Yes.
Are you looking for jobs in New York?
No, I'm not looking for jobs in New York, but I'm just thinking like you have a lot of people online who are listening and like a great network here, so if you give some more information about who you're looking for in New York.
Yeah, super helpful. So I think primarily looking for a head of legal research. So ideally someone with at least, 5 years of trust and estates experience, who's looking to, instead of do hand-to-hand combat, is like, wow, 6,000 wills, like I could be pretty efficient with my, knowledge and impact, and really want to spread that in a way that's institutionalized within these technology tools. So I think that's the type of person that we're really looking for, very mission-oriented. That said, we've also noticed, there's been some interest from people who are in corporate law and things like that. I think for the level of legal knowledge that we would need for this role, it might be the case that someone who is in a different part of law but is interested in coming in here would also make a great head of legal research, and we would just have to find the right advisors to mentor them on the actual trust estate and taxes and all of those things.
Okay, so you're only after one person from New York?
Currently,
in that role. And then we're also hiring engineers, people with sort of nonprofit partnerships experience. And then we expect the team to grow sort of fairly rapidly over time.
Yeah.
But that's the role that we're the CodeX is most likely
Yeah.
to help with.
Well, I hope we can help. It sounds like a really great project and really interesting. And I would love to discuss more about it, but unfortunately we have to kind of wrap up this particular presentation. Thank you so much. It's
Yeah, thank you.
it's really cool. And I want to go ahead.
I was going to say we have to run out, but my email is here, and we'll, find through Roland and Susan, maybe find us if there's anything else. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming over. Really appreciate you coming over.
Nice to meet you.
All right. So let's turn it over to Philip now. Do we have you still have to?
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think still shared by.
Oh, you have to unshare, I think.
Oh, sorry. Will that work?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Great.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm Philip from Germany. I'm a partner with Fisher, which is a European law firm with about 800 lawyers, and we focus on technology. We have offices in a lot of European countries, and we have one office over here in Palo Alto with European lawyers. I would like to talk about the impact of legal tech on some fields of litigation in continental Europe, where you can see that technology accelerates certain business models and makes them, in some cases, even stronger than the incumbent law firms. And I've chosen two fields where I would like to illustrate that phenomenon. I just wonder how we can get the next slide here.
Did Zoom kind of?
Right. There we go.
No, yeah. There you go.
Okay. So I'll start with three theses, and I'll come back to these at the very end to give you a little bit more detail. My first argument is a restrictive regulation of lawyers drives growth of alternative service providers. Litigation in continental Europe is a particularly interesting field for this, and accumulation of data and artificial intelligence enhanced competitive advantages over the law firms. I will give you two examples. One is the field of flight delay compensation claims. That's a typical B2C field of advice. And then the other one is what we call cartel damages claims, which is typically in B2B relationships. I will start with the first field, so the compensation claims for delayed flights. It's a very simple and straightforward regulation we have in Europe. It started about 12 or 14 years ago, and it basically says when your flight is delayed or when you're bumped, I think that's what you call it over here.
You bumped off a flight.
Yeah, bumped off a flight, then you get a compensation, and that is between 250 and 600 euros, depending on the distance of the flight and also the extent of delay. It has to be a flight within the European Union or into the Union or outside of the Union. So that's the regime, and obviously that's something a lawyer can do. But the reality is that only 2 to 4% of these claims are ever enforced, or that was the situation 4 to 5 years ago, for a number of reasons. One of them is the fact that these are very small claims, so it's not very attractive for law firms. And another reason is that it's a bit of David against Goliath, a small passenger against an airline which has all the resources and the know-how. And that is where about 4 years ago, new operators came into the arena and started collecting these claims. And that has really changed the landscape in Europe. So I've stolen two of the slides from one of our clients, which is called Flightright. It's one of the two market leaders in Europe in this field. What they do is enforcement. They have, as you can see, they have enforced about more than 150 million euros of these claims in 4 years, and they've had 3.2 million customers, and they have a success rate of 98%, which is obviously quite high. And it's quite an interesting market. It's estimated at 6 billion euros. It's a very simple calculation. They believe 1.3% of all passengers are eligible for these claims, and we have about 1 billion passengers per year, hence that figure. So what is so particular about these operators? Well, first of all, they take the cost risk of these claims. So it's a package where the passenger has no risk. If he loses in court, normally he will have to reimburse the other side's lawyer's costs and also a portion of the court costs. But in this case, it's all for the service provider. That's a huge competitive over the law firms, which in continental Europe cannot work on a contingency arrangement. It's simply not allowed. The way it works is that the operators like Flightright take 25% of the amount that's actually enforced against an airline, but only in a successful scenario. So no win, no fee. The second phenomenon is that it's a very simple scenario. We don't have a variety of possible outcomes. We only have a very small scope of procedural scenarios. It's anywhere between 250 and 600 euros, or if the court considers it's force majeure, then it's 0 euros. That's typically when the weather was so bad that the flight just couldn't be executed. What we see is that the operators accumulate massive know-how and all of a sudden find themselves in a position where they can challenge the airlines. They have the case law. They've pushed a series of cases to the European Court of Justice. And also they have a lot of bargaining power all of a sudden because they have passengers behind them. And secondly, they have the data, which is not the case for the normal lawyers. So Flightright or AirHelp, which is the big other competitor, they have weather data, they have information from other passengers that were on the same flight, and they have experience in enforcement. So they can exactly tell you how much a delayed flight from Berlin to Madrid on an Iberia airline is worth, because they know from thousands of other cases how long it took them to enforce it and whether the airline pays voluntarily, etc. So they've also come up with quite a few interesting products. One is called Flightright Now, which is really artificial intelligence. So they take the knowledge from thousands of previous cases and then offer a price for the compensation claim that is generated within a few seconds. And another interesting product is AirHelp Scanner. That's you may know that it's a program which searches the Gmail inbox for potentially eligible flights, even if consumers don't know about it. And so that's the way the operators presented. I'll go ahead a little quicker now. What we also see now is that airlines have started to fight back. So this is the example of Ryanair, which is one of the most aggressive and also successful European airlines. It's based in Ireland. They have come up with terms and conditions which ban the assignment of these claims. It's quite a spectacular act. I'm absolutely convinced this is illicit and void under European unfair competition law, but it's not yet decided in the court yet. What we also see is there's quite a gap in terms of European and non-European operators. So in some European countries, you do need a license from the government to do this enforcement job. In others, you don't. The question is then, does the so-called country of origin principle apply? Do you need a license in one country or in 28 countries? And what if you operate out of the US? That's unclear for the moment. Some operators charge VAT, others don't. That makes a huge difference in the competitive landscape. We have restrictive spam regulation, and we have regulation of travel insurance offers. I will not go into detail, but that's just an illustration of all the regulatory issues which are unresolved. So let me just finish on the second example for 2 minutes. That's the so-called cartel damages field. What we are talking about is it started all with a huge fine which was imposed on 5 European truck manufacturers, biggest fine ever imposed in the European Union, $3.2 billion. That's the face of Margarete Vestager, who's the competition officer of the European Union. She is supposed to be the most powerful woman in Brussels. As I said, highest fine ever imposed. One truck equals approximately $5,000 in damages. That's an estimate. We don't know yet because the court cases are only starting now. But that's what we believe is the value. And obviously, every company that ever bought trucks is eligible for these damages claims now. So what we saw is the appearance of a player in the market, which again is a legal tech operator called Financial Right Claims. They collected a huge amount of these trucks by way of assignment. So to give you an idea, our law firm, I think, has 7,000 of these trucks from, I don't know, 30 or 40 clients, which we are now enforcing. These guys collected 200,000, which then equals $1 billion as an amount in dispute. It's huge. And again, they work on a no-win, no-fee basis, so huge advantage over the classic law firm model. They collected all the evidence via online interface. And interestingly, they applied a B2C search engine optimization strategy to a B2B market and clearly overtook even the international law firms which are playing in that space. They were backed by a US litigation fund, Burford Capital, and they are working with, you're smiling, with a US-based law firm. It's a completely new model that we've seen in continental Europe. Also a huge advantage, the cost risk is capped by law. So anything that's above 30 million doesn't generate more cost risk. So they can basically just throw in more and more claims without having more risks. That's it, really. I don't want to take away more time.
No, this is great. Maybe, in the interest of time, if there's just maybe one question, if there is one. Go ahead, yeah.
I wonder if there is any relevant regulation in EU that would govern those third-party operators, because it seems that they're acting like law firms, but then they claim they're not law firms.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. They make sure not to be law firms. So technically what they do is enforcement services, and those are regulated in some member states, and in others they're not. So, for example, in Poland you can just do that without any regulation, but in Germany you do need a license to do it.
Do you see that in the future that there might be regulations?
I think there could be, yeah, but we don't know in which direction, whether it's going to be restrictive or rather liberal.
Yeah, no, I think this is a super interesting area for legal tech companies, and I'm sure there will be many more kind of claim opportunities, like the trucks in the future. Thank you so much, Philip, for coming in. This is really super interesting. And how can people reach you if anyone wanted to follow up?
Should I send my email?
Yeah, we can. I'll send your email through the chat if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah.
So people could follow up with you. And now, okay, so now our final speaker is Geras Mitkas. And as we said, we're gonna go a little bit over our usual time, but we'll close at 2:40. So over to you, Geras.